That's right, Henry the 13th. He is, or presumably was, he might be stripped of his princeling title, if that's possible, under German law. But he was, apparently, according to the German state, and 4,000 police officers with weapons acted on this very day. He was planning to overthrow democracy in Germany, to overthrow the German Republic, to reinstate the First World War monarchy with him as the king, the Kaiser, as we used to know. Kaiser Henry. What could possibly go wrong? Comic opera, of course. It all sounds a bit like the beer hall putsch in Munich in 1923, November to be precise. November 1923, Adolf Hitler staged a similar kind of armed coup to overthrow the Weimar Republic. None of us know what happened next, of course. Now, the turmoil in the Weimar Republic, which led ultimately to the triumph of Hitler fascism, of the Nazi beast, which went on to cause the deaths of almost 100 million people in the 1930s and 1940s, ending just 9 years before I was born, so not exactly ancient history, was the economic collapse of Germany. A collapse engineered by the idiot policies of Western countries towards Germany, which pushed them over the precipice into economic catastrophe through the Treaty of Versailles and the punitive policy of reparations, of forcing Germany to destroy its own economy in order to please the Western powers. You see where I'm going here? The only reason there is any scintilla of possibility of a successful military coup in Germany is because the German economy is presently being destroyed at the behest of the same idiot Western leaders in France, in Britain, and in the United States of America, as caused the rise of Hitler in the first place. Germany's industry is being systematically destroyed where it is not being dismantled and shipped, amongst other places, to the United States of America. The German Nord Stream 2 pipeline was blown up by American weapons coordinated by British Special Boat Service engineers, frogmen, and targeters. Britain and the United States destroyed a vital multi-billion euro piece of German economic infrastructure. Now, having forced Germany not to accept any of the more than 50% of its energy that it was getting from Russia, the Americans now invite them to send their industries to the US, where energy is cheaper and more reliable. I'm not making that up. That's the American pitch to Germany. We've destroyed your energy infrastructure. Move your factories here and even your skilled workforce here. We'll fast-track green cards for your engineers, for your semiconductor experts, for all the individuals who made Germany great, rich, and powerful. We will offer you a new home in the land of, if not free energy, then dirt cheap energy compared to what you'll have to pay at home. These economic self-harms that the German government of little soldier Schulz, a fragile, flaky Weimar Republic leader, if I ever saw one, are of course leading to societal pressures inside Germany that are feeding the frenzy of inchoate rage and frustration at the situation Germany finds itself in. Having been the economic powerhouse and the financial bank of the European Union, it sees itself literally coming apart at the seams as a result of the NATO proxy war in the Ukraine. And of course, just like in Hitler's time, there are a ready-made mass of potential scapegoats that those who wish to destroy democracy in Germany can make use of. In this case, the millions of migrants and refugees that the foolish policies of the predecessor Chancellor Angela Merkel have visited upon Germany, hoping to make use of the low labor cost of the cheapest of cheap labor to help fuel the German economic revolution. Now all these migrants and refugees are just sitting there waiting to be scapegoated by the kind of proto-fascists whom I presume were to be the fodder of Heinrich XIII's attempt to overthrow the German Republic, unmasked today. A princely thorn in the flesh of the commentariat, of the literati, of the glittering, bright, shining liars of the liberal classes in the United States is what Elon Musk has certainly turned out to be. His leak to Matt Taibbi, the respected journalist in the United States, a man of unimpeachable journalistic integrity, unlike the hyenas that are now ferociously descending upon him, actually doxing him, practically inviting physical harm upon him and his family. For what? For reporting what the man buns and the man bag, skinny jeans and sneaker brigade in San Francisco were doing with the public square. They were ensuring that those gathered in the public square in unprecedented numbers. This is my legal case, my statement of claim against Twitter, just agreed and about to be served on the courts in Dublin, in counting up the offence against me by Twitter of false labelling, shadow banning, and all the other censorship that was taken against me on an entirely bogus, absolutely false prospectus. I discovered that I have been defamed by Twitter more than 100 million times. How's that for the circulation of a libel? Almost unprecedented. I hope the judge thinks so. I really do. And Mr. Musk, the window for mediation with me is rapidly closing. But my point is, this is a public square of unprecedented magnitude. But they were carefully controlling who could speak in it, to whom you could listen in it. And they were doing so at the behest of, and in some cases, under the instruction of, the security state apparatus of the United States of America. And in place as the deputy legal general counsel of the company was a man called Jim Baker, formerly the head legal counsel of the FBI. How's that for symmetry? The FBI's chief lawyer was Twitter's deputy chief lawyer. Li Fang released transcripts today of instructions being given by the FBI in San Francisco to Twitter, instructions that were complied with to the absolute degree. The Secretary General of the state of Arizona was giving in writing orders to Twitter with which they were complying to ban this person, censor that one, expunge that story, and pretend that none of the things we now know to have been on Hunter Biden's laptop were anything other than Russian disinformation. This is more than a scandal. This is a conspiracy against the Constitution of the United States of America. This is not a few mad hats on January 6th with their bongo drums and their eagle feathers and their idiot, patriot, proud boy paraphernalia. No, this is a conspiracy at the highest level of the American security apparatus to give orders to a media company in breach of the First Amendment of the American Constitution. How's that for interference in American democracy? How's that for interference in American elections? This is not Russiagate and the Steele dossier, where young women were alleged to have been wetting themselves with excitement in a Moscow hotel room at the prospect of meeting Donald Trump. No, this is a provable, incontrovertible paper chain which demonstrates that conspiracy, and arrests will surely follow. I could name two right now that ought to be under arrest. I just have, without their names. The revealing of this malfeasance, of this absolute threat to freedom of speech and expression on the internet, is met by the Liberals not with outrage, but with outrage at the people who revealed it. You really couldn't make up this Orwellian state of affairs in which we now live, where the conservatives are the ones demanding free speech, and the so-called liberals and progressives are actually in charge of strangling free speech to death. No wonder they were so quiet about the Julian Assange case, because it now transpires that long ago, at least a decade ago, these liberals went on a long march from their previous visceral hostility to the American deep state and its security apparatus, to being mouthpieces for that very apparatus, apologists for the worst tyranny and dictatorship. No wonder they could not bring themselves until belatedly and half-heartedly to preach against the impending extradition of the world historic journalist, publisher, and truth-teller Julian Assange. Everything is now becoming clear thanks to the courage of a billionaire who is routinely rubbished by liberals for all of his many faults. How ironic that it is Elon Musk who is revealing the truth, and his critics desperate to conceal it, to the point that the aforementioned Jim Baker actually erased, wiped much of the incriminating material from the Twitter files. God knows what was on what he expunged, because what he failed to expunge is bad enough. And in any case, bad news, Mr. Baker. Mr. Musk has employed people that can recover everything that you expunged. Let it all out into the open, Mr. Musk. Tell us all Tell us who did what to whom and why they did it. And while you're at it, stop shadow banning and blocking the likes of Garland Nixon and my young guest, my brilliant young guest, Jackson Hinkle, this evening. Leave Garland Nixon alone. Reinstate Scott Ritter. Unshadow ban Jackson Hinkle. Take that lying label off my Twitter account. Why not? It's as well to be hung for a sheep than a lamb, isn't it? If you're going to go out, as you have darkly predicted, you might as well go out in a blaze of glory and be remembered forever. And in the last couple of minutes available to me, in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, even in the first decade of the 21st century, the news that American weapons were landing on Russian air bases 400 miles inside Russia, on air bases that house Russian nuclear bombs, would be a story almost beyond comprehension. There would be nothing else on the news except that. But that happened yesterday, and most people don't even know that it happened. You know that Moscow is closer to the Ukrainian border than the air bases struck by American weapons, presumably fired by Ukrainians or even foreign mercenaries in their hire. That means those missiles could have landed on Moscow. That means those missiles, American missiles, could have landed on the Kremlin. Are you people determined to create a nuclear holocaust on Earth? Or are you just so recklessly stupid that you imagine that the Russians will continue to thwart these provocations? Do you imagine that Putin is the worst that could be in the Kremlin? Don't you know that Putin is under intense pressure in Moscow to finish this war in Ukraine? Not by ending it, but really finishing it. No more negotiations. No more velvet gloves. No more carefully targeting. The pressure on Putin to respond to this most gigantic of provocations of American missiles landing in Russian air bases 400 miles deep into their national territory is clearly being underestimated by you, or you want a nuclear war. And if you want a nuclear war, the German people, the French people, the British people, and yes, the American people have got to ask themselves, are your leaders acting in your interests, or are they acting in the interests of others? Do you want to risk the end of the world for a country you couldn't place on the map, for cities you could not spell and certainly could not pronounce? Because if the answer to that is no, then you better get hold of your leaders pretty damn quickly, because your leaders are leading you directly into that good night. I told you, it's going to be a bumpy night, so fasten your seatbelts. This is the mother of all talk shows.